So here's something interesting. It's been just over a year since the global watchdog, the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, put South Africa on the international grey list for failing to meet international standards with regards to anti-money laundering, combating the financing of terrorism, and proliferation financing. Since then, South Africa has managed to make immense progress. On the 27th of October 2023, the FATF Plenary formally re-rated 18 of the 20 South African deficiencies. This was based on the progress made by the South African authorities in the 2-year period since the 2021 mutual evaluation. Of these, 15 were upgraded to be no longer deficient, as 14 recommendations are now fully and largely compliant, and 1 recommendation was rated as not being applicable to South Africa even. Following these re-ratings, South Africa is now deemed to be fully or largely compliant or not deficient in 35 of the 40 FATF recommendations, including in 5 of the 6 core FATF recommendations. This is a good thing. This means that South Africa is left with 5 key area deficiencies in technical compliance, including 3 of the 18 which were upgraded from non-compliant to partially compliant, and 2 which still remain as partially compliant since 2021. Since the end of 2022, South Africa has enacted 2 key legislative amendments or changes to its laws that have helped strengthen its case to the FATF and allow it to stay in good standing. The General Laws Anti-Laundering and Combating Terrorism Financing Amendment Act No. 22 of 2022 and the Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorism and Related Activities Amendment Act No. 23 of 2022. These, including other related regulations, took effect in early 2023. Now, due to these policies and law changes, South African Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has confidently communicated that the South African government expects to address all of these deficiencies that were identified by the FATF by early 2025. So why all of this fuss around the FATF? For clarity, the Financial Action Task Force, or the FATF, is a finance watchdog that is given power and relevance by the G7 and expanded into the G20, which are both intergovernmental organizations. It was established in 1989 to combat money laundering, terrorist and proliferation financing, as well as other threats to the integrity of the international finance system. It's notable that the terrorist mandate of the organization was only added in 2001. The FATF sets global standards for anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. It also promotes the effective implementation of these standards, and it conducts mutual evaluations of member countries like South Africa to assess their compliance with the FATF recommendations. So why does this matter to South Africa? Well, South Africa is a member of the G20, a grouping of 19 countries plus the EU and the African Union. Through this intergovernmental platform, we agreed as a country to collectively work to address major issues related to the global economy, such as international financing stability, which the FATF applies to. As part of the G20 grouping, the FATF is an endorsed entity that all member nations must comply with. But it's also important that people understand what greylisting is and why and how it matters. The greylisting itself is a list of countries that are under more policy and law implementation scrutiny when it comes to anti-money laundering and the combating of terrorist financing. When a country isn't seen to be dealing with these issues, they are blacklisted, and then institutional, governmental, and FDI financing tends to decrease as the country is seen as being a higher risk when doing business there. The whole greylisting thing is a deterrent to stay in line, or investor monies can and eventually will stop flowing to your country, and that will spell trouble. But how is money actually moving around in South Africa? Now, one of the issues that isn't being spoken about enough in South Africa is how there are reports that Spaza'S shops that are more and more being owned by foreigners are likely assisting the funding of terrorist groups globally. I know it's actually even crazy to consider, but IS or Islamic State and linked extremist groups are believed to be hijacking South Africa's smaller financial services to fund terror acts across Africa by moving billions of rands through Spaza'S shops and retail outlets in the informal sector. The profits from informal and often unregistered Spaza'S shops and money from other criminal activities are then quietly sent in modest, smaller amounts to Islamic terror cells spread over the continent to avoid being discovered. A Sunday Times investigation found that between 2020 and 2021, around 57,000 unregistered SIM cards were used to send 6.3 billion rand or 342 million US dollars via mobile money transfer from South Africa to Kenya, Somalia, Nigeria, and even Bangladesh. Money is also being seen to be embezzled through the hawala system, an unofficial trust-based payment technique that is far harder to track down than bank transactions. Money doesn't actually leave the country in this way, but someone credits your account in the receiving country. Uncertainty surrounds the amount of money that jihadists and other terrorist groups raise. The other problem is that some of this money donated overseas is really actually intended to support families, but more and more of it is now being mixed up with criminal cash. But experts believe terror networks are awash with cash from financially loose places around the world, including South Africa. Internal Islamic State documents seen by experts show that of the money raised in the African continent, the IS in Somalia keeps 50%, while 25% is split between cells in Mozambique and the DRC, with the balance going to the central IS. According to the South African Reserve Bank, South Africa's foreign direct investment, or FDI, decreased in the third quarter of 2023. The SA Reserve Bank's quarterly bulletin states that FDI inflows for Q3 totaled 26 billion rand or 1.4 billion US dollars, which was less than the 53 billion rand or 2.94 billion dollars that was reported in the second quarter of 2023. Furthermore, there was an outflow of 41 billion rand or 2.26 billion dollars from the portfolio investments in Q3 of 2023, as opposed to 4.6 billion rand or 250 million dollars in Q2 of 2023. More money was taken out from investments from the country. For comparison, according to the UNCTAD, total FDI levels in South Africa in 2022 were $9 billion, about 168 billion rand, down from $40.9 billion, about 750 billion rand in 2021, but still above pre-COVID levels of $5.45 billion in 2018 and $5.12 billion in 2019. Money moves in and out of South Africa, and the most important thing for us and the international financial community is to ensure that the money is moving in and out safely. Where credit is due, credit must be given. The government is moving in the right direction by addressing the FATF challenges and the suggested amendments to get off the grey list. We are part of the global community and we must act accordingly to not fall behind and hamper our own growth. Thank you for making time to watch this video right until the end. If you still have some more time, maybe check out one of the other videos and maybe tell us what you think about them.